hold on 1 second. Got to bring in the right hat today. Special hat. Rocking the Bukele hat from El Salvador. Got this last year when I was down in El Salvador. You can see the background picture here too. This is El Zonte, Bitcoin Beach. I was down there for the halving last year, and man, that was a ton of fun. Got to really see the impact that Bitcoin is having, just to see so many people so excited there, all the local vendors taking Bitcoin. It's really cool. So today on the Bitcoin Tech Wealth Edge, we are going to be talking about privately held and government held Bitcoin. So as we have, you may have seen some of the videos that I put out recently where we spent a lot of time talking about all the public companies, and we've got the dashboards and the levers and who has what and how they're adding it. So those are all things we've discussed before for investments. And so today is really not so much about the investing side, because you can't really invest in a government or a private company like SpaceX. But I think it's important to just highlight the situation, because there's an underlying theme here. There's a story about stacking Bitcoin. So whether it's in the public sector or in the private sector, you'll see there are a lot of companies and governments that hold Bitcoin that you may not have been aware of. So let's jump right in. First of all, I just want to kind of give you the lay of the land here. So again, in comparison, so what we have for private companies, we have their slice of the pie takes up about 12.5%, just shy of 300,000 Bitcoin on privately held balance sheets. So that's companies like SpaceX. Then you have governments clocking in second at almost 23%, with right around, as of today, 530,000 or so Bitcoin being held by individual governments and nation states. And then, of course, the largest of this group would be the ETFs. All right. Anybody want to take a guess at who the largest ETF is? Give you 2 seconds to think about that. So the largest ETF in the world, I got notes over here in this column, is IBIT. So that's BlackRock. They own everything, as most of you know. So BlackRock is currently holding 735,000 Bitcoin. And that number is growing almost on a daily basis. I follow their inflows and outflows, as I do with all of these ETFs. And most days, they're adding to the balance sheet rather than having outflows. So that number continues to grow, and that is actually larger than the amount of Bitcoin that by over 100,000 Bitcoin that Michael Saylor and the team at Strategy actually hold on their balance sheet. So IBIT is the largest holder of Bitcoin. That makes them the largest holder of Bitcoin in the world. Okay, and then the rest of the ETFs, you'll see the drop off rather quickly. We have Fidelity, that's FBTC. Fidelity's ETF has 206,000. Then you have Grayscale, and GPTC was the first one that ever was traded long before the ETFs got approved last January. Grayscale was all alone, and it was like a closed-ended fund, so they had a workaround, a loophole, if you will, as to how they could actually hold Bitcoin, and it traded a little bit differently, and it had high fees. But let's not forget, they had the largest head start, and that they continue to bleed out. So if you look in column D, this shows Bitcoin held previous to 2025. So anything that was held previous to this year. So again, you've got IBIT going from 552 to 735, and you've got Grayscale going from 206 to 185. So Grayscale on average is losing about 90 Bitcoin per calendar day that passes. That number was quite a bit higher actually last year when these ETFs first opened up. When the SEC approved all like 11 ETFs at once, there was myself included, a flood of folks removing their funds from Grayscale, from GBTC, because it was the only game in town. And then we moved over to, um, I moved some into iBit. I moved some to Fidelity. I also moved some into ARC 21. Many of you may be aware of Kathy Wood and the ARC Innovation Funds. They've got a highly volatile, but also highly intriguing and returning ETFs. So I like them. And again, just to kind of have Bitcoin in different places, I think it's a good idea. First of all, you should have Bitcoin off exchanges, right? You should have it in cold storage in hardware wallets that never touch the internet, right? Once that bag is packed, I think it's okay to have some on exchanges, again, to diversify, because you want multiple geographic locations, right, and different setup types. This is just going to, increase your security level. I know from experience. I was a victim of SIM swapping back in 2018 and had more Bitcoin stolen from me than 99% of the world will ever own. So it's a real deal. And I kind of chalk that up to my own education, if you will, in this sector. We really have gone, though, from the Wild West to a highly structured and organized. Bitcoin is now 16 years old. It's a teenager out driving around. It's not a baby. It's not a toddler that nation states can hold down any longer. You can have 80,000 Bitcoin sold on an exchange over a 1 or 2 day period, and the price barely moved because of that. So it is now a very mature and maturing asset at well over $2 trillion now. So again, back to the private companies here. I wanted to look at a couple of different things. We'll sort this by, so we have it by sector. So let's come down to the governments. The largest, you may or may not have known, the largest government is the United States. Now that is a debated amount because we currently are due, the government is supposed to release an audit on their findings and holdings of Bitcoin. And as of right now, we're going by what we last had heard and what's on bitcointreasuries.net. I don't think it would be too surprising to see that number actually be lower and us trying to have to jump back in and buy back in at this point. But as it stands on bitcointreasuries.net, you have the United States in the lead with almost 200,000, China right behind. So even though China, when people tell you, oh, I thought China banned it and it's illegal and blah, 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 do as I say, not as I do. What does China do? They own a lot of Bitcoin. United Kingdom is third. North Korea, interesting there at 13,500 Bitcoin. The nation of Bhutan. El Salvador coming in next. El Salvador is stacking 1 Bitcoin every day. And again, if we're looking at the direction countries are headed, Bhutan's actually come down a little bit, so they sold some off. They've realized some profit this year. I'm not going to hate them for that, but it is amazing to see what El Salvador is doing, just from their vision to their infrastructure to the reduction in crime to the, again, stacking more than 1 Bitcoin every single day faithfully. I love it. And so much so that I went and got the wife and I went down there last year and got our ITIN numbers, which is like their version of a Social Security card, because we were interested in having property there, and we weren't sure how things were going to shake out here. Obviously, I feel like things in the U.S. are in the right direction now. We have a administration that's favorable to Bitcoin and crypto, which is great. But you never know. And I always think it's good to have options. It's good to be aware. So that's something to be aware of. And you can see that Venezuela, Finland, Ukraine also hold Bitcoin as well. And then for the private companies, the largest one is Block One, and then Tether. Now, Tether, you may recognize that name. That's the largest provider of stable coins. That's a digital dollar, a decentralized version, not a centralized like a CBDC. So Tether has partnered with Rumble. Tether's big in El Salvador as well. Tether is working with Cantor Equity. So you have Cantor Equity, Tether, and Jack Muller Strike all working on the same fund. So Tether from a private alone holds 100,000 Bitcoin, which is really surprising. That's awesome to see. And then what their Cantor Equity Fund, which will soon be traded as XXI 21 instead of CEP. That's the placeholder for now, but once the SPAC closes, it'll be traded under the ticker XXI, and they expect to have several thousand Bitcoin added right away there, I think, to the tune of somewhere in the mid 40,000 range. So that's a lot, right? And then again, you have this kind of trifecta of them working together, those three companies, with Tether at the middle of that. SpaceX is probably the most well-known company on here. So we know that Elon and Tesla have Bitcoin on the balance sheet. They're one of the top 20 holders in the world. Well, from a private standpoint, SpaceX is also one of the largest privately held Bitcoin treasuries in the world. So that's really cool to see. And you can see the rest here. I haven't included everything. There's a lot more companies than this that have, less than 30 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And this number is growing as well, just like on the public side. Again, good to be aware of this. Let's take a look at who is acquiring the most right now. So, no surprise, we talked about this earlier, that IBIT, BlackRock, is acquiring, this is a net. This is after people sell, the corporations. Bitcoin's up a lot this year, right? It's up over 20%. And so you have to a traditional finance guy, that's enough to take profit. To a crypto bro and to a Bitcoin maxi like myself, like, we're holding forever. We'll buy the top forever, as Saylor says. But the reality is, in TradFi, they're going to take profits there. So you're seeing a lot of profit and a lot of sales. But even with all that, this is how big BlackRock's IBIT ETF is. It is still bringing in net 764 Bitcoin per day. And at today's current valuation of almost 120,000 Bitcoin, that is a lot of money. Billions flowing into IBIT. And again, you see Tether ranking high. They're the highest in the private companies as far as adding to the balance sheet. They went from 83,000 last year up to 100,000. I anticipate that number will go even higher, and that will also help if you're invested in CEP, soon to be 21 Capital. That would be a good play as well. Interesting that North Korea was not showing up until this year. So if you break it down on a per day basis, North Korea Kim Jong-un and team is stacking harder than almost everybody out there. So I don't know what that says there, but again, that is interesting. That was something that surprised me as I was putting this presentation together. So let's go down to the bottom. You can see this is where the concern would be. So who is losing out? Who's bleeding out Bitcoin? So yeah, we had a nice lead, and we do have a nice lead when it comes to nation states owning Bitcoin in the United States. But we're actually not gaining any momentum. We are losing almost half a Bitcoin a day at this rate. So while El Salvador is stacking more than a full Bitcoin per day, we're losing almost a half a Bitcoin per day. So you can see two trains heading in the complete opposite direction there. And that's concerning. I don't know what you think, but I'd like to see our government turn that around and begin to find budget neutral ways to add. There's so many ways that they can add, especially with all the tariffs and the different creative measures they can use to add Bitcoin to the balance sheet would be ideal and relatively easy. And then again, Grayscale, the biggest loser. They are the ones that are losing the most. You can see the bottom ones are all ETFs here, right? And so what that's telling you is that's painting the same story that, well, they're all, not getting market share, not getting their piece of the Bitcoin pie. Well, guess who is? BlackRock. And again, we know they own just about everything. So that's kind of concerning as well. But it just shows you that when Larry Fink and BlackRock have that much Bitcoin and that much invested, and now they're talking to high net worth individuals of increasing from 1% to 5%. From 5%, now they're saying it's reasonable to be at 15%, right? And eventually they'll realize, just like I did, that you're going to have 100% or almost your entire net worth in Bitcoin, because it really is the hurdle rate. It outpaces everything else. So anyway, I thought this was interesting. Let me know what you think, and let me know if there's any surprises or anything else you'd like to talk about next time. But this has been a nice little recap of all the privately held and nation-state Bitcoin holders. So thanks for joining, and we'll catch you next time.